Hi, comrade. Welcome to our podcast series. These episodes feature the best of Lab-Left, an international forum organized by Szikra Movement in collaboration with Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. We gathered in Budapest in November 2024 in order to discuss how to win from the left. Thanks for tuning in. The Raising Our Banners panel focused on establishing left-wing media. It featured David Broder from Jacobin, Marko Miletic from Machina, Serbia, Tomáš Hucko, Capital, Slovakia, Jan Belicek, Alarm, Czech Republic, Gaspar Pop, Mirce, Hungary. It was moderated by Bethany Riley, our partner from New Internationalist. So we're here with Beth. Your panel just ended about left-wing media. How do you feel? Or are you just too exhausted?
It has been an exhausting weekend, but no, it's been very inspiring. It's always really interesting talking to journalists in other contexts. At New Internationalist, we're an independent media cooperative, and like a lot of independent media publications, we have our, struggles. But we fortunately kind of operate in an environment where we have the right to report on whatever we want. And so, talking to fellow editors working in very restrictive contexts, being forced to kind of self-censor in certain situations, being targeted with smear campaigns, it's difficult to hear. But I think it seems like editors from Mirce, from Machina, from Alarm, they are all very steadfast in what they do, and they're really helping to grow the left-wing movements in their respective countries. So very inspiring.
Did you feel like you were talking the same language, or the context was so different that the struggles were really super distinct?
Yeah, I mean, when, I think Tomáš at the end, when he said, how people can support independent left-wing media, and he said, just give us the money. I mean, that's a language you
give them the money.
Yeah. But in other respects, no, it was very different. Yeah.
Mm. And you've been the media partners for this event, for which we're super grateful. Any surprises or stuff that was unexpected for you in terms of Eastern Europe or this context that's still underreported, I guess, in media, even on the left?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting to me is that even though there's a right-wing hegemony in many countries here, Hungary especially, there's some very, very impressive local left-wing organizing that I don't see in where I'm from in the UK, for example. Efforts to ban Airbnb in a district in Budapest, being able to just rally an entire communities against mining. I think these have been quite surprising, and also new left-wing parties being able to get representation in government on a fairly quick scale is very impressive to me too.
Glad you were impressed, and thanks for being with us these past days. Hope to have you back.
Thank you, and thanks for having us as well.
Városi tornyok most oly némán álltok, boldogságra virágcsokorra várok.
So welcome to the final panel of this forum, Raising Our Banners. It's very inspiring and great to be sat here next to so many editors of left-wing publications. It's quite rare to see this many in the same place. So, it's nice to feel like the majority for once. My name is Bethany Riley, and I'll be chairing today. I'm a co-editor at New Internationalist, the media partner of Lab-Left. We are a worker-run, reader-owned media cooperative based in the UK. And since 1973, we have been covering social climate and racial justice issues with a uniquely internationalist lens. You probably chatted to some of us at our stall at the back, and we'd encourage you to come by if you haven't yet done so already. As we face, the multiple crises that have been discussed a lot during this weekend, independent left media has never been more important. Narratives pushed by the right that scapegoat migrants and minorities are winning hearts and minds and votes across Europe and beyond. Left and independent media play an increasingly crucial role in exposing the real culprits driving inequality, climate breakdown, and plummeting living standards. But it's at this time that we're under attack and many of our outlets are struggling to survive. Here in Hungary, we especially see how the erosion of independent and progressive media has helped to propel Orban's hateful anti-gender and anti-democracy discourse into the mainstream. And as a result, many voices have been silenced. We've heard a lot. There's been a common thread during this weekend about how the left can effectively communicate its ideas and cut through the right's dangerous discourse. So today we'll be talking about the role the media, particularly independent left-wing media, can play in doing this, as well as the challenges that Eastern European publications are facing in particular. So today I'll be joined by David Broder, who is an author, historian, and translator. He is an editor at the Transform Review and Europe editor at Jacobin magazine. We've got, I'm going in a kind of random order here, Jan Bielice is the editor-in-chief of the online daily outlet Alarm, the most popular progressive media in Czech Republic. He co-founded the website in 2013 and became its editor-in-chief in 2020. We also have Gadzsi Pop, has been an editor at Mérce, a left-wing news site based in Hungary since its foundation, and editor-in-chief since 2021. He's also one of the founders of the East European media outlet, Elmo, an East European media corporation. We've got Tomáš Hookšo, is the founder and editor-in-chief of Kapital, a critical journal in Slovakia. He is also a writer, translator, editor, and publisher. On my left, Marko Milatinj, apologies for all the names, is one of the founders and editors at Machina in Serbia, launched in 2014. He is he's active in organizing media workers to improve labor rights and media freedoms as well. So today we'll have 45 minutes for the discussion, and then I would like to open up for questions from you all. So to start, I've briefly introduced everyone, but would like you to tell us a little bit more about the publications that you work for and what are the most important stories that are happening in your countries at the moment that you're covering, and that are not getting kind of the attention of the rest of the press. So Gadzsi, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you. Can you hear me with this? I hope so, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for organizing this. It's very nice to be with you. So Mérce exists, most of you know Mérce, so I will not speak for long on this. We exist as a news analysis and to an extent opinion site since 2017. Before that, we operated as a blog, as a community blog, let's say. In our editorial, there are 10 to 15 people working on content creation, and the specificity of our operation is that we were the first news and opinion site, media site in Hungary that mostly worked from donations, readers donations, and we still operate from about 80%. We operate from donations. Briefly on a few topics that we were covering in the few years, and Bethany also asked us to talk about what we are proud of. in the most the deepest we delve into exploitation and labor capital or labor state conflicts. In that regard, we try to do two things. One of them is to give platform and make in-depth interviews with workers themselves. We ask them about their work environment, exploitative methods, what kind of sense do they get out of their work. This is maybe one of the most interesting work we do, because people can say very interesting stuff about their work if you ask them. This is one of the things we are doing in this topic, and the other we are following worker struggles, and we are trying to provide structural analysis of the field. We're also pretty active in feminist women's rights struggles. For example, for years we are covering femicide cases and obstetric violence cases, and the organization against these. We were together with NGOs and informal groups on the ground pretty closely, and I think we have made possible in some cases that some of these issues also became a topic for the mainstream, and at that point our goal maybe is to provide a more structural analysis about these issues. We were also pretty much involved we are one of the first ones who started to cover this tendency of battery plants, which is a regional issue, growing out of the ground since the last 3 or 4 years. They were also pretty fast to respond, which also became pretty much a mainstream topic as it should be. And maybe just a few words, since we are at an internationalist event in the last 1.5 years, but also it goes back for longer. Maybe we were the platform that gave the most consequent critique of the Israeli government about what is happening in Gaza and the Middle East, and trying to defend and raise attention on human rights violations in this war. And maybe a few words on ALMO, since we are some of us here in this panel. For us, since the beginning, it was very obvious that we have to somehow tackle this dearth of information about any kind of meaningful sources that we can reach within the region. It is very hard to get meaningful analysis from neighboring countries in Hungary. It's very surprising if one works that it is absolutely counterintuitive, but because of many structural reasons, this is so. And so a few years ago, we started to contact each other and start building up this kind of partly informal, partly sometimes a little bit formal network called ALMO. And through this, basically through these contacts, through this network, we are able to cover, for example, Rio Tinto and the lithium mines in mining conflicts around the lithium mines in Serbia, or were able to provide an alternative view on the recent elections in Georgia or Moldova, as if you followed. Basically, what you can read in not just in Hungarian media, but surely in the Hungarian, what we can read is this: there are the Putin people and there are the nice pro-EU people. This is the sole issue in these countries, obviously. Nothing more to talk about. And then through these networks, we were able to reach out to local activists and local journalists who are capable of giving a more substantiated and alternative read of these developments. So for this, we are very grateful that we have this network, and very grateful that we have here our comrades now as well.
Great, thanks, Jan.
Hi. My name is Jan Bielicek. I'm editor-chief of Deník Alarm, which is Prague-based media outlet. We are publishing a couple of articles daily, so we consider ourselves as a daily publication. And I would say that our role is to be some kind of a mediators between, let's say, left-wing movement or left-wing intellectuals and the general public. I take it as our, let's say, main goal, how to transfer the radical, very beneficial, very progressive ideas into general public, and I hope we, in this way, kind of been successful. Right now, we have around 1 million page views every month, 500,000 visits every month, and 100,000 plays of our podcasts as well. So we are not only article based, but we are based in audiovisual content as well. So podcasts, video shows, and so on. And we are existing for 11 years, more or less. And if I have to talk about some major, let's say, successes of our praxis, I would have to definitely mention the reportage series of my colleague Saša Ulova, called Heroes of Capitalist Labor, which was published in 2017 when she was working as a undercover as a worker in low-paid jobs in Czech Republic, and in a laundry and a chicken farm, and so on. And I would say in Czech context, it helped to cultivate the debate about working conditions, low wages in Czech Republic, and so on. So this was a major thing. And maybe some of you read her reportages on the British Guardian this September, where she was publishing her another project called Heroes of Capitalist Labor in Europe, when she was working as an Eastern European migrant in Germany, France, and Ireland. And it was a successful project as well. Was well read on Guardian. So I would say this is our strategy to how to actually, bring the expertise of left-wing movement and left-wing theory and try to convert it into stories that could be comprehensible for general public, that could touch these people, and that could attract the attention to the issues that they are dealing with on their daily basis. We are not obviously skeptical towards theories and intellectual thinking. We are publishing these as well, but we're trying to be low-key, down-to-earth, as comprehensible as possible, and we see it as our goal, because as writers we are skilled in telling the stories, and that's what we are trying to do. So basically that's all about Alarm, I would say.
Hi, my name is Tomáš Hučko, from Slovakia. I'm editor-in-chief of Capital, which was founded in 2017 as a printed journal. Since then, it also became an online platform with articles being published quite often, almost daily. It will be a daily from January on. And since 2017, we also became a publishing house. We have published more than 20 books on different leftist topics. And if you ask about what are the themes we are concerned about right now, besides the maybe very traditional leftist topics, as Tamáš mentioned, in Slovakia, it is now also the destruction of culture and cultural policies. That's a huge topic for the country, since our populist/fascist government is destroying as much of the culture as possible. So this is pretty important. We are dealing with it in series of articles and podcasts and videos and so on. Also, I would second you, Gaji, when you mentioned the war on Gaza. We're also, I think, one of maybe the only medium in the country that is also giving a voice to Palestinians in this conflict. And I think that's it. I would keep it short in the beginning.
My name is Marko Miletic. I'm co-editor of web portal Machina from Serbia. We started in 2014, 10 years ago, and this was a period when we have a small emerge of a new left in Serbia, and in this process, basically, we realized that we don't have any left media in Serbia at that moment. So this was the main idea, to create some kind of a basic media infrastructure that would be some kind of channel for left activists, left politics, organizations, and so on, to transfer this to mainstream media and general public. I think that 10 years ago, 10 years after, we can say that we succeed. We have certain success in this. At the beginning, we started actually as educational project because we didn't have left media, but we also didn't have left journalists, we didn't have left editors and so on, and none of us actually was trained or educated as a journalist. We basically start to self-educate ourselves, and this was a process of 4 years actually of self-education. And then after it, let's say like 5th or 6th years of existence of Machina, we started to kind of professionalize our editorial board and so on. And at the moment, there is 7 of us who are regularly monthly paid to work on this. A lot of collaborators around this, and so for the topics, if I understood, like the most recent topics, actually, I would mention this. As I said, we are trying to be some kind of a channel between left and general public, and that's why we are trying to write and to follow what are the most important topic in general public and in general in society in Serbia. Recently, in last years, we were writing a lot about Rio Tinto company, about lithium mining battles that were happening in Serbia. Constantly, we are trying to give a space to left activists, to left any kind of political thinking about these issues, and this was our this was something that we could give to mainstream media and to general public, because in the mainstream media they will speak about this, but not from the left perspective. And also in next. Last couple of weeks, there was 3 weeks ago, I think, there was we have the collapse of railway station in Novi Sad that immediately killed 15 people on a spot, basically, and this wasn't just an accident. This happened because of the reconstruction of this railway station is basically part of the huge corruption, processes that are happening in Serbia. And immediately this provoked a lot of protests, demonstrations, and so on. A lot of activists were jailed and so on. So this is happening in Serbia at the moment, and we are really following it and writing a lot about this, and also doing a lot of content on social networks on this topic. Which also is giving us a lot of place actually in the mainstream media, because again we are doing this from the left perspective, and we are giving the place to people who are involved in this, but coming from the left scene.
So I'm David Broder. I'm a Europe editor at Jacobin magazine. So our magazine was started in 2010. Went and became like a print publication, like quarterly, the following year, which was around the time of like Occupy Wall Street. And so we have a website. We have lots of franchises in other countries as well. So we have Latin American, Spanish, Brazil, German, Dutch, Greek, Italian, and another one I've forgotten, but which is equally important. So I suppose our work is very much, a lot of what we publish is kind of like news commentary like I said, we don't do that much kind of reporting, although we do some, particularly on like labor issues, so particularly like like Amazon organizing, that kind of thing, and to some degree kind of about sort of like migrant policing, just a couple of things, but it's not really our bread and butter. Mainly we do kind of news commentary and then kind of historical, cultural, theoretical pieces, but basically trying to produce that content, but not in an academic way. I think broadly the intervention Jacobin makes is within progressive, educated, very politicized public opinion. Like, we don't claim to speak to the great mass of people, and also for that reason, like, we do some podcasts and a little AV, audiovisual content, but we're not producing like TikTok and stuff. And I think we're trying to make an intervention which is basically to make socialist politics and the politics of class more central to the concerns of the left wing of US, mainly electoral politics. In my own job, I mean, I think, as was mentioned before, I mean, there's a very strong tendency in Anglophone media to present the politics of almost all European countries as just a battle between progressive, liberal, pro-EU forces and then reactionary, anti-EU ones. So we try, and part of being a US publication, I think also allows us to do, just in terms of readership and money and so on, is to have a kind of network of contributors from most European countries, where we can present kind of class and left-wing perspectives that I think are often a lot more interesting than sort of other sort of broadly progressive publications. I mean, I think as a editorial group, we're mostly like in our, like, I mean, I'd say I'm 36 years old and I'm the oldest member of staff. So probably it might be similar for the other publications here, but like, I think we're mainly people in our 30s, and like probably our readership like slightly younger than us. So we have a lot of more elderly readers, not many very young. And a lot of our journalists and contributors are kind of journalists quite early in their careers, I'd suppose. And like, I think one thing that we've been quite effective in doing, although maybe we shouldn't be credited for it as a magazine, but like, a lot of our writers then go into more mainstream outlets. And I think like, and I sometimes do myself, but I think like it's important, of course, to have people writing about, like the series Jan mentioned, like people writing about labor issues for like The Guardian or the NYT and so on. And some of our comrades do that. But I think it's also, of course, important to have a kind of a magazine as a kind of space for like a collective discussion, and in a sense a sort of loose community of contributors and readers. I'll just finish by saying, like, I think our, it's not like, oh, we had a genius idea for a magazine and then it was a great success. I mean, basically what happened was the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, then like Occupy, BLM, the Sanders movement very much created the conditions in which we exist and heavily shape what we write about. And in fact, I'd say have changed the politics of the people concerned. We have undoubtedly become, as a rule, and not exclusively, but like I say, overall, we've become more like reformist and oriented towards like electoral politics, because something of an opening for that has opened up. But it's not like we're the like journal of the Democratic Socialists of America or something. Some people sort of make that connection, but I think we exist within the same movement of opinion and organizing, and we try in our own way to be to create an intellectual space and hopefully in a sense of political education, but without claiming to be like the vanguard or something like that. But
Jan and Marga, you both talked about kind of being a bridge between the movement and the public, but you're both kind of operating, well, everyone here, well, me and David, in a media landscape dominated by very right-wing publications, centrist publications. So how do you cut through that and get your message across?
Well, it's interesting. I would illustrate it on our first motto was
alarm is occupying Czech media landscape since 2013. It was our motto because we were kind of outsiders on a Czech media landscape. Nobody was in our team. Nobody was journalists. There were like people who were studying, I don't know, history, philosophy, arts, activists, and so on. And then as we get more into the mainstream, we changed the slogan to "We're creating mainstream together." So that was our strategy we could reform or somehow reconfigure what's the mainstream media landscape in Czech Republic. And I would say we are part of on the fringes of the Czech mainstream right now. We are operating on the fringes of the mainstream. But I would say, and even if I was listening to discussions here, that maybe the whole concept of a mainstream is changing. Like when we're talking about mainstream in a global meaning, we're talking about, I don't know, New York Times, we're talking about BBC and so on, and these like centrist liberal media. But there's a whole new media landscape that's operating behind, as Naomi Klein wrote it, behind the mirror or in the mirror world. And maybe we should redefine like what our focus should be, like how to get into this different media spheres that emerged in the last years. Somebody, I don't know who was it yesterday, was mentioning like the popular podcast shows that are gathering the huge or bigger audiences than the mainstream media nowadays. And maybe our aim to get into the mainstream is something outdated, and maybe we should rethink it, and maybe we should try to develop our own, let's say, media scene that could compete with the far right, with the media, with the mainstream media landscapes, and so on. So it's get me thinking, like, what's the real concept of a mainstream media nowadays? It's changing a lot. I saw some survey that I guess like 32% of American public is trusting the mainstream media in the US, which is, like a really laughable portion of American society. And I would say it's pretty much the same in Europe and in Hungary and in Serbia. So we have to rethink all this. And we just barely started. I think the future of the audiovisual content is kind of a future of media or news and a media landscape. So we have to focus on this, and also we have to think about the new narratives that would get rid of being a part of a mainstream and trying to develop something completely different. I have no clue what's it gonna be, but get me thinking that we have big troubles that we have to deal with.
I will speak from perspective of Serbia. I mean, it's the problem is that Serbian society is very divided society. I mean, this is what the ruling party, the government, what they're doing. So basically, this is also applied on a media scene, and so you have mainstream, of course, but you have mainstream that is seen as pro-government, and then the other mainstream that is seen as oppositional. And it's very hard to be like, basically there is no some kind of a third way. So you should fit somewhere. So it's we are usually fit obviously on this oppositional side, and I think that in Serbia at the moment, like the majority of people simply believe in mainstream media, but they believe in this kind of pro-government government side, and the other side actually is basically centrist liberal, but still oppositional, and they're also fitting us there. I mean, we are not mainstream, but if mainstream is picking something from what we are doing, writing, recording, whatever, this is oppositional mainstream. And of course we are We are part of our journalist association. We as a journalist, we as a media, we are participating in different forums that are happening around the media, organizing and so on. And we share the same problems as this oppositional media. If we are, like reporting from some protests or whatever, so we're basically we could also be attacked, or we also are getting some threats and so on and so on. So we're basically simply fit into this part. And for this, what Jan mentioned, like podcasts and things like that, I mean, I don't think that they have like a huge significance in Serbia at the moment, simply because society is very divided, and then there is, there is no one actually rising from what is happening, in political sense, there's no any kind of rise from what is happening on podcast scene or whatever, some kind of social network. If this exists, then these are the politicians who are mostly members of this ruling party or ruling elites. Yeah.
We have one advantage and one disadvantage of being the only progressive left-wing media in the country. The advantage is there's no competition, so that's good. But the disadvantage is there are no partners to work with on the media scene. One of the ways to get into the mainstream is probably something that, as David mentioned, that we have, I would say, really produced a couple of now esteemed left-wing intellectuals that are now being called into the mainstream media as a guest in podcasts, and of course now they also write for, let's say, liberal media. So of course that's one of the ways how to get into the mainstream media. It's not really, I'm not really happy about it, because we are losing those authors, because now they write for liberal media where they are, better seen, as in Capital. But it's in Slovak situation, it's very hard for left-wing media to get into the company of mainstream media, because sometimes we are kind of, like, I would say, ostracized. I would give you an example. When there is an attack of politicians on media or on some journalists, quite often the big mainstream media create some kind of open letter or some kind of resistance and call other media to sign it with them. So you have the biggest TVs, few of the dailies, and then many very small journals, like much smaller than Capital, and they're always invited to sign these open letters, and we never are. And we would sign it. We also fighting for the freedom of the press, and we're doing a lot of stuff in this area. But somehow, because we are the left-wing media, we are not partners for them. And I'm not really sure how to change it. It maybe just takes time in a post-Soviet country to change the perception of left-wing media.
Yeah, I can relate to this. We are also not part of a lot of chat groups that seem to be effective. Yeah, maybe on the long lines what Jan was talking about. I agree that we really need to develop new strategies on how we operate. We see Mérce, and I think maybe we are very similar in this respect as part of this. David also talked about this, like part of these institutions that grew out of this post-2008, maybe they call it a populist moment or something like this. So we are an institution that were, first of all, that were organized around covering what was happening on the street in feminist issues, in environmental issues, and challengers of the system from the left. And that, of course, changed a lot in the last 20 years. In the last few years, surely, it is probably there is today there is less challengers or less capable challengers from the left to the system in the region as well and all around, and there are less activities and less an emancipatory movement that we can see and that we can help with the media. So I think in that respect, we should absolutely think about the role of what we are doing. Of course, Marco would or could counter this with what is happening now in Serbia, obviously. So this is very important role to this day, obviously, to show some extremely important struggles. But I do think that there is a change of time in this sense.
I mean, the situation in Serbia is such that simply, as I said, society is extremely divided into, two specters. And what gave us this kind of bigger visibility in the mainstream or bigger presence in the mainstream is simply that like 90% of all kinds of oppositional actors, they're like parties, organizations, activists, students, and so on. In the case of Rio Tinto, and then later what was happening now, realized that they need to work together. Like these topics were so huge and so big and so important to public that simply, like, you have really like the huge spectrum from left wing to right wing, that is working together on these issues, and we are covering this from the left perspective, but the mainstream is lacking this, So the mainstream will be, kind of liberal centrist or right wing, but they're lacking kind of left perspective. And because all of these actors are working together, they need to include also this. I mean, they're willing to see and to hear like what the left is speaking about this. And but simply, situation in Serbia at the moment is like that, and this gave us this opportunity to be closer to a mainstream and more visible in the mainstream.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not just not being platformed that makes it hard to get your message across, but as you were saying, Tomasz, press freedom issues, restrictions, and here in Hungary, journalists have been targeted with spyware, subjected to surveillance and attacks from politicians. Has that affected your work at Metza at all? And how do you kind of navigate those threats and risks to journalists?
Yeah, maybe shortly. We are not that important and dangerous to them to target us specifically. There are a few occasions when they did, and of course, the general strategy of the government with all the state resources is to try to make people numb on social issues and stop any alternatives to be built up. And of course, this is a general strategy, and as part of those, we are also targeted. And of course, this gives a general feeling of sometimes of powerlessness. This gives a general feeling of there's a lot of let's say, it's very hard to not be burnt out after this. It's extremely important, and we are trying to find our ways in this to be a very supportive workplace, to be a very supportive workplace. And this is something that we are talking about quite a lot in the last 1 or 2 years, but it's a constant challenge. There was maybe one instance which I can talk about, which is a common experience with Mérca and a lot of Szikra activists, which we lived through the last 2 years. I guess things changed after the perception of the left being a threat changed a little bit after András Jámbor, who was the founder of Mérca and who's now an MP for Szikra, entered the parliament. And there was a very resourceful, let's say, smear campaign against him after neo-fascist march And in 2023 February, there was a street violence organized by anti-fascists from Italy and Germany, and they were trying to frame András and Szikra, and a little bit also Mérce, as being instigators and being concrete organizers of that. And that was also connected to some acts of crime of pedophilia that they also try to frame András with. And of course, that had a lot of effect, I guess, also in the Szikra movement, but also at Mérce to deal with this kind of smear campaigns. That of course instigated also a lot of well-funded state and government attacks, but also attacks from the streets, from just citizens being very enthusiastic about attacking us this or that way. That is, of course, that has a lot of mental consequences on our editorial as well.
I can't compare the Czech situation to Serbian, Hungarian, and Slovakian. It would be ridiculous. So far, we will see what's going to happen next year after the elections. I think it could get tense in Czech Republic as well pretty soon. But I would say there's a rule that the more threatening the piece is, there's the more political pressure it gets. And I can remember like 2 occasions that something like this happened. One was related to the reportages of Sasha Ulova when she was working at Andrej's Babiš back then, like the prime minister's chicken farms, and she was writing about the working conditions there, and he was in a TV all the time complaining about her horrible work, lies, and so on. There was this type of pressure. The second example would be the huge case of a sexual violence of one of our Czech MPs that we were covering. He's in jail now, but back then it was an immense pressure on our editorial team to kind of destroy us, or at least the journalist who was doing this job. So if the pieces, if pieces are threatening enough, they naturally bring this political pressure as well. And the last example would be, I don't know, we were doing a series about this anti-gender movement in Czech Republic, and I think it was called like Between God and the Far Right or something like that. And we end up in the court because of we were writing about this one organization, like Movement for Life. I think it's the English translation of this, the name of this organization. We claim that it is anti-women or against women, and they were trying to sue us for staining their reputation, and they lost. And even the judge said it's absurd to be in a court because of this. But no, these organizations, especially ultra-conservative, far-right, are producing and trying to produce more of these slap suits. And I guess like Marko would tell you more about the slap suits in Serbia and so on.
There are many attacks on journalists by the governing parties. As you may probably know, like our prime minister is well known for calling journalists anti-Slovak prostitutes. So that's a direct quote. So obviously the situation is not great, but as Gaji said, we are not that important, so they don't attack us directly. But obviously the discourse they are proposing, not only against journalists, but nowadays it's mostly against NGOs. There is this huge fight against NGOs in the country. They are proposing a law, as almost everywhere else, the law that NGOs would have to be have the sticker of a foreign agent. Is this Russian law that is coming everywhere. So in this atmosphere of anti-NGO atmosphere, we have a huge amount of hateful comments under our articles or videos that we should be banned, or we are Soros founded NGO, and unfortunately we are not. So like I would really appreciate Soros money, but we don't have them. But still we are being called a Soros medium. So you get a lot of hate in the comment sections on the social media and under the articles. So that's one of the effects it has. The other is now there is this huge also pressure on queer people and LGBTQ people in Slovakia, and like all the queer organizations and culture organizations don't get the state support, and they have these really horrible attacks by the Minister of Culture and other ministers. So now we are losing our queer colleagues because they need to look for a different kind of job because they don't feel safe working in the media or culture sphere. So this affects us and them a lot.
Does it have any impact on self-censorship at all? If you receive a lot of abuse?
No, I don't. Well, I don't feel it yet, or like none of my colleagues auto-censor themselves, as far as I know.
Marco, I know that journalists in Serbia face smear campaigns as well.
Yeah. As Machina, we were once targeted by one smear campaign. We got some threat messages from time to time. We were attacked during reporting. We are getting, for example, luckily we haven't got any kind of a suits so far from companies, but we are getting, like, if we are writing about labor rights in certain companies, we would get some kind of a letter, where the company explaining to us that this is not so true and so on. Like, this is constantly happening. But so far, no one didn't, pull some kind of a charges against us. But for the, like, there is a certain number of media in Serbia that is very endangered by this, especially by these slap suits. I mean, in Serbia, we really had some kind of a serious cases of attacks on journalists. Like, we have the whole house with the journalist inside that was burnt. I mean, luckily the man is alive, but his whole house was burnt like 3-4 years ago. And there are a lot of attacks on the streets during reporting and so on. But the slap suits are really becoming kind of a common thing, in recent years, and companies are really pulling this out. And simply, for small media, this could be devastating because you can't simply, have enough finances and resources to go in a court for this type of charges. I mean, the amount of money which they're, asking for someone, accusing someone, is enormous, and the companies are doing this simply to make a pressure, on media not to, continue to write about something and so on. And this is, for example, this is dangerous not just because certain medias are, simply in danger by this, but this is dangerous also because there is auto-censorship because of this. Like, all other medias will think twice if they're going simply to write a name about certain company or certain people and so on, because this could, end up in also some suit again. And I think that organizations who are around Europe who are following actually these cases, they gave to Serbia last year, like in 2023, they gave to Serbia some kind of award for being a slap state of the year. So we are really we really, this is really becoming common. And luckily the media associations, journalist associations, so on, organized around this. There are certain funds that could help to medias. There are lawyers that could help, and so on. But it's a question if this is going to be enough, because there is more and more of this type of suits.
I just want to add that because I started and we all mostly, I think it's important to stress that the harassment and the organized harassment and attacks don't necessarily come from the state. You also talked about capital fractions and certain capitalists who are trying to stop talking. But if I think about it, we had received the most harassment after talking about Gaza and after talking about Palestine and what is happening in the Middle East, which is not organized by the state. It is done by NGOs and done by enthusiastic citizens. And in that question, of course, we don't get any solidarity from wherever, basically. So I think that's very important to stress, that you don't need to have a strong authoritarian right-wing whatever ruler in order for you to be pushed to get silent. And I think I'm also not so sure that self-censorship doesn't happen. Not because we are encouraging each other, obviously, not to write about it. We are constantly trying to make us work on the important stories. But after you're having all that hate letters, or in your surroundings, you're constantly getting the threats, you will think twice. I think most of us would think twice, and I don't think it should be downplayed.
Just a short anecdote, and maybe a bit funny anecdote. Like the closest organization or person who was, to pull some kind of a charges against us was actually the president of a trade union, of one of trade unions in Serbia, because he didn't like what he heard from a speaker who was, part of the panel that we organized. And this was like the closest to pull some kind of a charges. And like the president of different unions actually intervened to stop him to do this.
It's no one wants to kind of be subjected to the kind of abuse, and it has a huge silencing effect. But I think as well, coming together in this setting, you being able to share these stories and kind of have cross-border solidarity between your organizations must be a kind of form of comfort and of learning too. And you kind of mentioned a bit about, the network that you set up, ELMO, the Eastern European Left Media Outlet, as a way to kind of plug the gaps in coverage between different Eastern European countries. Because in Poland, for example, you might not get any news about an industrial dispute happening in Slovakia, and there's just isn't this kind of cross-border exchange. So why do you think it's important to collaborate across publications in the way of as you do interpersonally, but also, to share what's going on in your respective countries between each other as well, and to form this stronger left-wing publication presence?
I would just start. I think it was a Merce's idea, or maybe Machine and Merce. I don't know. So I'm not any kind of founder of this idea or whatever, but I just want to share my thoughts on this and why I think something like this network of Eastern European left-wing media outlets is an important thing, because when we are talking about recent political developments, we know a lot of things about, for example, primaries in Iowa or Wisconsin or whatever, but we don't know about the major laws and shifts in Hungarian, Polish, or Serbian politics. And I think it's obviously like United States politics are influencing the European politics hugely and in a big manner. But we should focus more on our, let's say, neighbors and our closest neighbors and allies, let's say. So I would say this is one thing, and maybe there's one reason why it could be important for the international audience as well. I just remember that when I was in Budapest in 2011, just a year after Viktor Orbán was elected, the people that I met here, intellectuals, artists, and whatever, were saying like, this is the avant-garde of what's going to happen in West in next years. And back then I was confused. I didn't know what they were thinking about and what they had on their mind. And I think after Donald Trump was elected for the second time as a president, there's this avant-garde is in prime, let's say, and it's maybe gonna swallow in the whole world for a moment, hopefully for a couple of years, and then it will be conquered again. But maybe it was a laboratory for these like reactionary political forces to be explored more deeply in Eastern Europe, and maybe that's why it's important to be interested in what's going on in Eastern Europe. Maybe we'll have some, more positive things to tell about our society in the near future. But in the last 14 years, it was important because of this.
Tomáš, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you made. Seeing an example of what is happening in the neighboring countries, because I had the same experience like many, like 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I talked to all my Hungarian friends and explained the situation. And I took it seriously, but I thought like, I'm sorry for you guys, but we were fine. It's not happening in Slovakia. And now it is happening. And I think that now, for example, you guys in Czech Republic take it much more seriously. Like you really realize that you are not immune to what is happening. And I see it now that with all the fuck-ups that are happening in Slovakia, all of my Czech friends in the media take it very seriously and talk about the lot and write about the lot, and you invite a lot of us to your podcast and talk about it. So I think this is really important for our cooperation.
And David, I'd like to bring you in here. Earlier this year, Jacobin published an op-ed titled, although it kind of doesn't seem so at the moment, but No, Eastern Europe Isn't Doomed to Right-Wing Rule. With a lot of left-wing movements emerging here that we've heard about during this weekend, and parties, what role can left media play or is playing in this moment? You can give like a wider perspective.
I think it actually relates to what Jan just said about Hungary as a laboratory, in the sense that it's quite clear that like Hungary is very much in view in the United States right-wing media as like a kind of laboratory, as this like supposed like utopia of right-wing rule. Perhaps now it's a bit rivaled by Argentina as the focal point, but very much obviously Tucker Carlson and even Trump. And I've been many times to the National Conservative conferences, which in the US and London, which are lavishly funded by the Danube Institute and the MCC and all this. So it's also important for us to understand and to have a different perspective from our own point of view of what the reality of Hungarian society and of Orbán's base is, because obviously, or maybe not obviously, but we often read in like The Guardian and the New York Times and so on, like a kind of reflection of the right-wing narrative in which Orbán appears also there as this like pro-worker conservative who's supposedly doing these like great things for like Hungarian workers, and like probably like most people who are aware of that narrative wouldn't be aware of like what was the Orbán government's policy on giving people money during COVID. Right. So, okay. So I think also like, with the article to which you refer by Roman Boskovsky was about the initiative, the Central Eastern European Green Left Alliance, and like an attempt to bring parties together in this region. Of course, that initiative very much expressed a disappointment with a lot of the left-wing reaction, including, and probably particularly in the United States, to the Ukraine war. And like, honestly, I mean, like in our coverage of Ukraine, we have expressed a range of positions, but I mean, I'd say our readership, to be honest, is pretty hostile to the Ukrainian side. Like, if you read any Jacobin article about the Ukraine war, the huge majority of the comments accuse us of being, you're the NATO compatible left, this kind of thing. So, so obviously it's important for us to carry perspectives from, left-wing activists, in fact, not just in the countries involved or the parties involved in the alliance concerned, but, like we, published a fair few articles like, what is it like to be a socialist in Lithuania at a time when the same Lithuanian government that is like rabidly authoritarian and anti-migrant suddenly sets itself up as the champion of freedom for Ukrainian refugees. And of course, that issue, obviously the issue isn't just, the double standard on the treatment of refugees, but also, of course, actually the reality of what it's like to be a Ukrainian in Lithuania now, particularly like 2 years into the war. So, so in our way, we try and tell some of those stories, but it's certainly also true that we could be a lot better at having more voices and more contributions from actually most Central Eastern European countries. I mean, and part of why I'm here and having conversations with people here is I hope we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for us all to be networking and journalists' favorite activity. So I really want to make sure that people in the audience get a chance to ask any questions, and to make the journalists here feel more awkward being in the questioning seat rather than the ones doing the interviewing. So yeah, can we open the floor now to questions?
No, I mean, I said we have different strategies for financing, obviously. We are now just in the process of transforming the strategy from subscriptions to donations. It will be very similar, I think, to your strategy, that the content is free, but you can donate. The point is either donating or if you use the social media for sharing the content, it's also nice to share the all those calls to donate. And I think you have much more experience in this area.
I think we actually were inspired by Merce previously, like starting this donation system in 2018 or something like that. So right now we have 80% of our budget covered by our donations from our readers. It's thousands of people every month, which is awesome. So this is the best direct way how to support our operations. But apart from that, I don't know. I would like to know if there's an interest, for example, among the international left-wing audience, interest in the content about Eastern or Central Eastern European politics. I would say that it's important, but the thing is, if the project like this could survive, and if we, for example, I guess that's what we're gonna do with Elmo, with Merce, Machina, and Capital, and others, that we will try to produce, let's say, content in English. If there's enough audience, enough readers who would be interested in these stories, and that it could be like a surviving, living project. So that's more like my question to the audience. But apart from that, read us, support us, and promote us everywhere you want, and you can.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, like, not exactly for the like survival of our magazine, but I think that's very important for its like, keeping it as a living project is like, we always strongly encourage like the creation of like readers groups for like our readers to actually like meet up and talk about, like even just like get together like 3 like 800 word articles. And like, you know, a lot of people who felt like, you know, politically, like, and actually I'd say like a lot of the times our readership has grown has often been actually in response to like, say things like, you know, like Trump's first victory or so on. So like a lot of people who feel a need for like political community, but who are very like, who might be like a bit atomized or just like reading online, actually like we encourage people to hold like physical meetups to talk about the articles. And actually like more than 30 of those groups turned into like DSA branches, like when that was growing, which meant we lost our readers groups. But you know, so I think it actually was quite interesting in terms of producing some sort of political community from people who might otherwise have been, like not necessarily want to join a political party or something.
Well, I would agree on all of this. So maybe to add something new. In Serbia, we have a problem with donations simply because of the technical reasons. It's very hard actually to collect donations that could give us some kind of sustainability. So we need to find other ways, although we are trying to collect donations, and this is always kind of appreciated if someone can donate. What could be important for us and maybe for other media who are doing, for example, reporting, like sending a content. From time to time, we ask people to send us, like photos or videos from something that is happening, and that we could, write about, cover it, share it, and so on. This could also be very helpful to us. And also, what we did a couple of years ago, and I think that we as media still can do this and help to a movement that then got something back. We were working with trade unions, and educating them how to write statements, how to send the statement to a media. How does it look? Because it's if you're simply if you're formatting your text correctly, and then you send a proper Word document, it's easier to publish something. So it's always good if some organizations, and readers, simply send some kind of properly formatted, text. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as always, it's being in parts of left movements, left media is just so important, and you're playing a role almost as an activist too if you support and subscribe to left-wing publications. So would definitely recommend following everyone here if you don't already, and keeping up with what people are doing. I think we have time for one more question if there's any. Yeah.
Hi. So it's not lost on me that you're all men. That's great. I'm glad you're here. I'm sure that there's a reason, and my question is not about what about the women in your communities and all that kind of stuff. It's actually more about how the left is working towards really representing, I guess, gendered stories and making that important. And I know Marko will know this. We have sort of commercial leftist, I guess, publications like Nin or Radar, and in a whole year, these are weekly magazines, and you'll see 2 women on the cover. And you will hear from the reporters who are men and women complaining about this. And it makes a huge difference to the representation of leaders in our societies and stuff like this. I've noticed it's a real problem in Serbia. I've noticed the media really chasing male heroes to put on these covers, or just old boomer politicians that are, the same person. And there was a really interesting thing in 2022 during the presidential election where there was a female presidential candidate, and it wasn't her on the cover of this left-leaning publication. It was actually a member of her party who was a man. And so I would just love to hear from you guys, and even if there's women in the audience who represent any leftist media, about how this looks in the left space.
Yeah, thank you. We also realized, like with Jan, just before the discussion, that we are all like 40-something white male panel. I didn't realize when I accepted being in the panel that there will be so many guys. But I would probably accept it anyway. But of course, it's a good point. I'll just tell you a bit about our praxis in Capital. For one thing, we have more female than male colleagues in our editorial team. Also, when we put together a printed issue or organize a discussion, we always take this into consideration. And like 90% of the time, we reach the gender, what would you call it? Like 50-50 attendance. Balance, thank you. Sometimes not, of course, it happens that you get a male panel. But not so often. And also, I must say we were the first editorial board in Slovakia with a feminist section, and we had feminist articles like since day one. So that's what we do to achieve this.
Just briefly, the one and only rule in our editorial team is that we have to have like 50-50 balance of men and women in a team, and it's like this from the start for 11 years, and like feminism and women's rights is one of the, let's say, most important topics in our publication. So that's about it. I guess for us in the last few years, what we achieved in this respect is that we created workshop inside the editorial where only women work, but not only on issues that concerns women, but other issues as well. And also when we, in terms of when we are dealing with workers' rights or labor struggles, we tend to, or at least try to, have also a women's rights perspective, a feminist perspective. I guess that's what I could say.
I think, I guess I kind of think there's kind of two aspects to our approach, in the sense like, okay, so certainly like, when we're preparing an issue, then of course we think about like, the relative amount of, or the like gender balance of contributors, and like, if it's like, if it's like, 70-30 men, then that's a problem. And then we like commission to like, it's not like we have like a quota or something, but like we'd certainly like change the commissioning in order to make it more balanced. But then I think there's also kind of another element, which is kind of part of your question as well, which is like, okay, so it's like, if we claim that this is like social subjects who we want to, or who, who we think are the, like, we talk about class a lot, right? So it's like, if we're talking about class and the bits of the working class we're talking about are like, if we represent that as like male industrial workers, even in like, also in like kind of artwork and stuff, then that's obviously like a problem. So obviously we need to think about like the, and it's like a bit like actually I said before, like with the, the idea like, oh yeah, like the working class, people say, oh, well, the working class votes for the far right. And then the idea of what the working class is like, like retired ex-miners and this kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, of course. And of course it's very wrapped up also with questions of like, like organizational democracy and even the dominance of left-wing spaces by like political professionals. So
yeah, sorry, I'm Szikra from Machina. So you said that you don't want us to prove that we're gender balanced editorial boards, but it so happens that Machina is, and that we have a co-editor who's female. Here are two of us, and like we have active in Machina, which is like 50-50 balance. And it's also funny in the case of Machina, because so it happens that in the last two conferences we had an entirely female presence. So thanks.
We're also majority women at New Internationalist, which is great. So yeah, thank you everyone for sticking around to the end, and thank you again to the Szikra team for bringing us all here. It's been really amazing to connect with everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. To find every other episode, follow our feed. This episode was produced by Lab-Left-nek. Thanks to everyone who made it possible.
Zengünk harang, veled együtt zeng a szívem, őt látom, jön már felém. Muzsikál